You know how in sports, when a player does something remarkable, commentators often make reference to it having been right out of a video game because it's hard to believe it was real. Well, much of what Steph Curry has been doing can't be done in current-day video games, and that's created a conundrum of sorts for developers such as Visual Concepts. Welcome to the Press Row Podcast presented by Hit the Pass. I'm your host, Brian Weedeye. Joining me on the show right now from 2K Sports NBA 2K series is Mike Wang, gameplay director, and Scott O'Gallagher, the gameplay producer, or one of the gameplay producers, that is. Incidentally, 2K16 was the Press Row Podcast Sports Game of the Year winner for 2015, so congrats to both of you again on that achievement and the achievement of the game in general. It's great to have you on, and it's really appreciated that you took the time out to talk today. How are you guys doing? Mike?
Doing good. Waiting for Scott. Hey.
Yeah, good. Thank you very much, man. Appreciate it.
Everything's good. Yeah.
Thanks
for having us on.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Anytime. Before getting into the implications for the NBA 2K series of what Steph Curry has been doing, I'm interested to get your reactions simply as fans of the sport to what we've been witnessing this season. Scott, how about you go first?
Oh, geez. I don't know. Mike's heard this rant like many times. There's obviously nobody like him. If you go over the history of the past like 15, 20 years, outside of maybe like Isaiah, I mean, really volume shooting point guards don't win championships. So anytime I talk about that or I throw some dislike towards Westbrook or these other guys that are high volume shooters, they say, oh, what about Curry? Well, Curry's in a land of his own. He's a 180 guy, 90 from the line, 50 from the field, and above 40 from three. So what he's doing, I don't know, teaching kids, it's scary because the more that these 3-point percentages go up, the more that your traditional power forward like Kevin Love and all them die off. I mean, Kevin Love's averaging 5.5 attempts right now. Reggie Miller averaged 6 for his career. So it's people are running to the three.
Yeah, Mike, what do you think of all this?
That's not what Scott thinks. He shoots like this. When we play lunch ball, he shoots the same way. So he's just babbling on. He also thinks he's ruining the game of basketball, which I completely disagree with. I love it. I've wanted a 4-point line in the NBA for a long time now.
Oh, Mike, Arcade Nation, stand up.
Just inside the 3-point or just inside half court. But anyway, I digress. It's awesome for me. We watch so much hoops, and we've been fans of the game for so long, and it hasn't been since Jordan. I think since I've had this feeling of I'm not sure what this guy's going to do on any given night, and so for me, it's awesome. I just love that. Anything can happen when the Warriors are playing, and that Steph is doing things that I don't think we've ever seen anybody in the league do. And so, to me, it's exciting. I love it.
Yeah, for me, I don't have a team anymore. Mine was stolen away. So generally, over the last almost 10 years now, I've found rooting interest just against certain teams. I just root against teams. I don't really have anyone to root for. This has kind of changed it because, no, I'm not a Golden State Warriors fan necessarily, but I seek out their games now. And I was practically yelling as he shot in that Oklahoma City game and made all these amazing shots. And then, of course, the game winner at the end. I was up out of my seat.
Man.
There's no one in any sport, I think, outside of guys that are on the teams I root for that can evoke that kind of reaction out of me. And so that's kind of what it's been for me, is it's brought a new level of interest to the NBA almost. And I'm sure for a lot of people that's the case, a lot of fans around the country.
Yeah, we get a lot of Curry fever living in the Bay Area, but I think it's just across the nation right now, and how much this story of him playing better than a video game is caught on. It's pretty. He's the top of the town in the NBA right now.
Yeah, and he's remained likable. Sorry there for a second. He's remained likable somehow, which is not really the case with every superstar in sports.
They're a lot like, I don't know, I always go back to my 2000 Rams. Remember, they were going 5 wide shotgun, and they were playing 100 miles an hour, and they were all having fun doing it. That's a lot what this Golden State team is doing. And I think one thing that is frustrating on that side, and it's not because of Curry, but it's like you see these deep threes and they're overlooking the rest of his game. He's if not the best ball handler in the league. He's in the top 3. He's phenomenal at reading the defense, especially in pick and roll. He's as good off the ball as he is on the ball. Or with the ball, I should say. These are a lot of skills that other players, he's better coming off of screens than JJ Redick, not because he can shoot, but how he, works to get open. We saw what happened with Kawhi Leonard, etc. It's just people kind of starting to overlook that, but it's like, no, like kids, he's the complete package.
Well, I'll tell you,
the rim too.
Yeah, I'll tell you, who hasn't forgot or missed out on that stuff is the ratings in NBA 2K, which have been reflecting his passing and his dribbling in roster updates throughout the year. So, Mike, you said it's led to a lot of discussion, and it's true, on this very subject of how Curry fits into NBA 2K. And so I wanted to start with you as far as the video game goes, and the basics of shooting within the game that's in place right now. How has that traditionally translated to on-court performance of the players, and why might not that be flexible enough to account for what Curry is doing right now?
Well, yeah, as you know, Brian, I mean, when we make this game, it's all about balance. It's all about taking the numbers that we get in real life and translating that to our rating system and the framework that we create for what makes a good shot and what makes a bad shot. And to that end, there's certain things that our rating system just does. At a certain value, then that translates to a certain percentage. And we don't factor in everything in terms of like, how does every player shoot in every given situation? So just generally taking deep shots when 30, 35 feet, or shooting in traffic, or shooting off the dribble, we just naturally penalize those things because everyone in the league more or less gets penalized in kind of the same way, right? As they take these bad shots. And so in terms of the framework, it was never really designed to handle exceptions that way. So even though Curry's rated a 99 in all his three-point ratings, he's still getting hit just like everybody else does in taking these quote-unquote bad shots. And so that's where the system has to probably change a little bit to accommodate what he's doing this year.
Yeah, Curry has, like you said, a 99 rating in both three-point shooting categories. So what does a 99 really mean in NBA 2K16? Because he's considered the best shooter really in history based on the rating scale that you guys implemented this year. But what are the limitations still that are on him? And can you guys under the hood, can you exceed that 99, or is that basically a ceiling?
Yeah, I can tell you a little bit about it. So right now, a 99 rated guy averages, and this is basically just an average of all shots from three. So his wide open to contested, it averages around 55%. Mm-hmm. So that's usually around where the best shooters in history have been, around that average, right? So we take that number, 55%, say, for Steph, and then we say when he's open, he gets a boost. When he's crowded, he takes a hit. And that's where the problem is, because right now Steph is he's kind of breaking the mold in terms of what his good and what his bad shots look like. It's almost like a blur. Mm-hmm. Sometimes he's wide open and he's bricking shots, and sometimes he's got three guys on top of him and he's shooting from 35 feet and he's all net. So that's where we're running into some issues with Steph.
Yeah, Scott, what about his release? That's something that I notice, and a lot of people notice with him, is how quick he gets the ball off, and how does that how does that play into NBA 2K16 as far as release timing? Because the success of your shot is partially based on the timing of the shot. So, but in the NBA, in the real games, it looks like he's just practically throwing them up there, and he's almost got no account for that. It's really fascinating to me that how to account for that in the video game. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, timing is definitely important. Mike, you probably can allude to this better than I can, especially as far as openness and things go like that. But timing definitely matters. But Mike, you should probably take that one.
Yeah, I mean, the cool thing about Steph, and we, as you know, we had him in mocap, and people complained a lot for years on how slow his shot was.
Yep.
So when we had him in, and just now no one can really complain. This is his exact shooting motion, exactly how he shoots. All his shots are down to the T. But yeah, it takes some time to master it. I think you have to get used to getting rid of the ball quicker than you normally do with most guys.
Yeah, and even just beyond what he's doing from normal distances, shooting from normal distances, and how frequently he's doing it. He just broke the record for threes that he already held.
Man. Yeah.
He's on pace for something ridiculous like 400, right? So the biggest issue to tackle might actually be where he's shooting them from now, because he's been making them at a high percentage. So from 28 to 50 feet, which is over 4 feet beyond the three-point line, all the way to, I believe, 3 feet behind midcourt. He's shooting 67% this season on about an attempt per game. It's something like 35 out of 52 now. Now, like Mike said earlier, this is not a shot that's a good one, whether it's in a real NBA game necessarily or a video game. but especially in the video game where it's still a terrible low percentage shot in NBA 2K16. Does this need to change for him? And if it did, how would having that capability fit into the perception of what is a simulation game?
As you were talking about percentages before I was getting to your question, so apologies, is I think there's a misconception of looking into the overall three-point percentage and then how open somebody really is, right? So I'm looking at Sports VU numbers from last week, and basically it's telling, hey, how open is a guy? And Curry, when he's open, when there's no one within 12 feet around him, he's shooting 78%. 78. And there is over 60-something guys, roughly, I'm looking at here, that are over the 60% mark. You know what I'm saying? So guys are more open in our video game. Obviously, I think I may have already said this, than in real life. Iguodala, on the year, when he's 12 feet plus open, he's 10 of 14, shooting 71.4%. So that's basically kickouts. And, me and Mike would talk about it all the time, so especially with all the other guys in here as well. It's like, man, if he's as open as he is in our game, Curry can go 7 out of 10 or 8 out of 10. So Golden State has 3 guys shooting over 75% on kick-out situations, essentially. They're making it more than guys are hitting free throws.
That's remarkable.
Yeah.
So besides the ratings, which we were just talking about, there are other ways in NBA 2K16 that players are defined for their individual unique skills. There are things like badges, hot zones, the custom shots and releases. Are those routes to possibly enhance and define him to a greater degree in the future too, do you think? Is there like someone suggested to me, could he have a badge that gave him the capability of shooting from farther out that no one else had?
Yeah, I think that's you nailed it on the head, because that's exactly what we're looking at doing. That's what we've been talking about doing with Steph. Because, like you said, we mentioned before, the framework is the way it is, and it makes sense. If 99% of the league is going to shoot worse when they're contested and shoot better when they're open, shoot worse when they're further behind the line, 35 feet from half court practically, if that's the rule, then obviously you don't have to make a rating to support that rule. It's more, let's create something that's going to break the rule, and that's exactly what we'd probably be doing with Steph. And that's what badges basically are designed to do. They're designed to say, here's an exception, or here's a special context in the game that someone excels at, or someone can do something better than anyone else. And so that's what we're looking to do with Steph.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. Go ahead, Scott. Did you have something?
No, I was going to say it's a tough balance too, because it's like, where is that breaking point? He's literally taking a 37-foot jumper, and it's a jumper.
Yeah.
The stats that you just read prior, it's like, I've used this to Mike many times. It's like, if that happened, if you lost a game that way, or, you know what I'm saying? It's no different than a Hail Mary in football or something else. You want to throw your controller. Yeah. But he's doing this stuff at an absurd rate, and we're reacting like everybody else. Well, now it's like what is the stat on the three-point thing you were talking about? He could hit 400. Didn't Larry Bird hit like 90 and 86, and then that was the record? He was doing almost 90 in a month.
Yeah, I think there's even considerations to be had to, what is the average length of a quarter that people play, whether it's 6 minutes or 7 minutes. So if he makes one of those a game in a 6-minute quarter game, that's essentially, it starts to feel like more. People see it more often. They get annoyed by it, right? There's all that kind of stuff, but then you still want that realism of he can make it because he's actually doing it in real life. So it's how does that fit? I said something along the lines of he's basically out of an arcade game that you guys have to fit into a sim game with everybody else, and how do you actually blend that together becomes the difficulty.
Yeah, another thing too, Brian, that I'm sure you're aware, and all of the the listeners of this podcast are going to be aware of, is that the last thing we want to do is bring back something that looks like last year's patch 4 or the demigods. We don't want to have a guy out there who just breaks everything, and there's no reason to play as the Warriors in a realistic way anymore. You just run up court, cross half-court line, and just bomb with Steph, and it becomes a contest of who takes and makes more threes. That's the last thing we want to do. Yeah. Because Steph is a smart player. He takes smart shots. Sometimes his shots are crazy, but he takes smart shots. So we want people still to be playing the right way, and so that's where the slippery slope is, and that's what we have to be careful of when we're talking about designing. The ridiculousness of his game for next year.
Totally. I think the complexity of everything, like Mike is alluding to, in the game changes. Like even on the AI side, when does he decide to take that shot? You know what I'm saying? He had already hit 10 threes or 11 threes at that moment. And there's a bunch of what ifs. It's like the dude hit a 35-foot pull up. Like, what do you want to do? You just kind of got to tip your cap. But then it's like, okay, does your full court pressure D change? Or, you know what I'm saying? There's a bunch of logistics that start going into it. Do you want him pulling up like that in the first quarter? Then people are like, oh, this ain't sim.
Well, yeah, if you're facing him in your franchise or whatever, and he starts doing that to you, then you guys are just going to hear about comeback code the whole time. It just it starts to weigh on you a bit. But yeah, I mean, I can imagine there's also concern about how that affects things like online competition, because if the Warriors and Stephen Curry are at a level above, which they are in real life now, but if they're at such a level above everybody else, is there a reason to pick other teams online? Things like that.
Right.
And then also, in modes like My Career, can you create a player that eventually becomes as good as Curry, or is that some kind of level that you'll never reach because he's just so special? There's a lot of design considerations to be had, I'd imagine.
Yeah, these are the exact questions that we're asking each other right now and mulling over. And we're on the forums all the time, and so we hear the concerns, and so we're well aware of the badness that can ensue if we do this wrong. So that's we're taking our time with it, and we're gonna do it smart, and we're gonna do it in a way that is faithful to Steph Curry, but more importantly keeps our game, the competitive and the fun experience that it's supposed to be.
Yeah, and does he become an exploit when he gets these capabilities, right? And that's another thing that you guys have to work on as far as balancing, is that he can do these things, but he can't do them all the time and at the same rate. He's making 67% of those insane half-court shots, but he's not taking 10 of them a game.
Nope.
There's a reason why he's making them at that percentage. If he took them at 10 times a game, he wouldn't be shooting 67%. So you can't. Sure. So it has to, there has to be a flexibility there to where, yes, he can make them, and maybe in certain situations he has an enhanced chance of making them, but you can't take them all game long and be successful, because then again you're losing that realism that you guys are known so well for.
Totally, and that's not really, watching them, they have so many moving parts. I mean, Draymond Green, you could argue, is a top 10 player in the league. I'm waiting for you, Mike, to say something about it. But and, you got Klay Thompson, you could argue is a top 10 shooter in NBA history, especially from the percentage wise. You still got to execute with them. I think I just got something today like, hey, and Play Now Online, you shouldn't even be allowed to play with them until like Division 3. You know what I'm saying? It's like, really, you still have to, don't call. There's a reason why they don't do ball screens with really Bogut anymore, because he can trap, and it's a bunch of moving parts.
Yeah, I totally understand that. And you guys have done a great job at 2K with the post-release support for 2K16. That includes the roster updates, which just a couple days ago Curry moved up to 98 overall, which makes this season for him considered within the game to be the second best season for a player in history. Only Michael Jordan's 95-96 season. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that is, his shooting stats have been maxed out essentially, but he has, like we talked about a little bit before, he has been moving up in the passing and the dribbling and even some defense, and I think his speed has gone up. So he's moving up to this point where it's almost like it's a historical place for a video game to be in this moment and dealing with this kind of unprecedented challenge that you guys have to take on. Are we at the point where 2K16 with Curry, this is essentially what he is, and you guys are working on the challenge of 2K17, or do you still have some ideas for ways to make him more interesting in 2K16?
It's an interesting question, because we are talking about possibly doing another patch for this.
Wow.
Now it's not set in stone, and even doing a patch for this is not the safest thing to do. Yeah. So we're talking about. I'm talking with Ben, my shots engineer, about this right now, actually, and just we're thinking about it. So it might happen. If it happens, it'll probably happen closer to May in terms of when this would drop. Mm-hmm. And like you're saying, with post-release support, it's important that whatever we do, we have a way to tune it or fix it even after the fact without another patch. So we're trying to figure out all these kind of moving parts and figure out what we can do for Steph. For sure, 17 it'll get fixed, and it's a no-brainer. But for 16, we're trying to do something as well. So stay tuned. We'll figure out what we can do.
Yeah, that's great news. It's definitely, a situation that we haven't really seen. I tried to think up points in time where this could have been possible, where you had a player who was exceeding the capabilities of a video game, which is typically the video games. You would see things. You have the Michael Vick from the Maddens, where he was better in the video game than he was, or he could be exploited in the video game. But you don't have guys who you wish you could exploit more. Like, there needs to be more exploits utilizing Stephen Curry within the game, because this is, again, you guys base this game completely on realism and simulation, and it's done such a fantastic job of that for 99.99% of the players in the league. But he is so unique that it really brings up this difficulty we now look at now. And so
he's borderline Bo Jackson, Tech Mobile type of realm. That's it. And we come in here every day in the office. It's like you just kind of look at each other like, man, what do you do?
Well, it's got to be a fun thing, a fun challenge for you guys, I would imagine, because this is exactly what people watch sports for, and it's what they want to replicate and they want to experience within a video game, are these moments like he had in that Oklahoma City game where, you want it to be on your side. You don't want it to happen to you necessarily, but even in those situations, you remember those. And some of my favorite experiences with video games have been losses where it's just been a real battle and really a rewarding experience, regardless of whether you win or you lose. And it's just, whether Curry's on your side or not, it's got to be amazing to watch that happen. And then within the video game, see that happen also and give you the opportunity to kind of live that out yourself.
Oh, totally. And Mike's done a really good job all year of keeping his hand on the pulse, especially when it comes to shooting. And then this is it. This is why it's really kind of taken off. It's what do you do? What do you do?
Hey, J.R. Smith in 2K10 was pretty close, though, right?
Oh, man.
he was amazing in 2K10. Couldn't be stopped.
Yeah, we tend to discover guys like that in almost every game, where you're like, it shouldn't be able to do certain things, and then they can. But even then, it ain't Steph Curry. So I think it's fair to say this is a pretty unprecedented situation, and it's a pretty interesting development challenge. But there's every reason to believe the team at 2K is going to get it figured out, and it'll be interesting to see how the series adapts when taking Curry specifically into account. So big thanks again to Mike Wang and Scott O'Gallagher from 2K Sports for coming on to discuss where things are at now and what could be in store for the future.